All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Limitless MD. I'm your host, Vikram Raya. Today is a cool topic: the operating system that builds eight-figure businesses even if you never sell. So really what we're talking about is this is the business infrastructure that allows you to build a 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, even $1 billion company, right? Now, obviously, as you get bigger and bigger, there's more sophistication needed, but the infrastructure is essentially the same.
What if you could reclaim hours of free time each week, create legacy building wealth, and devote more energy to your passion projects without giving up on your career as a life-saving MD? Dr. Vikram Raya is a functional cardiologist, high-performance coach, and real estate expert, is here to give you the tools, strategies, and solutions you need to transform your life, unlock your limitless potential, and achieve greatness, all while freeing up your precious time. Welcome to Limitless MD. Let's dive in.
So I want to let you know that businesses don't rise to the level of the founder's talents. They rise or collapse to the level of their systems, right? You don't need a better product. You need a better operating system. And so why this episode really matters to you guys. Most founders were like artists, right? We love, the look, the feel, the logo, the color, the smell, the restaurant food, all of that, right? Versus who's the team, the structure, the P&Ls, infrastructure, right? And so honestly, most founders are built like artists, not architects. And it's cute. You can build a $1 million company, right? That's what creativity gets you. But to get to 5 million, 10 million, 50 million, $100 million of revenue, you need leadership, you need a structure, you need an operating system, because if not, your success is fragile. The key thing I've learned when I've studied other businesses and I've run my multiple businesses is how do you make your business become predictable, scalable, and then sellable? And the thing is, even if you never sell, you still want to make it sellable. What that means is you're not the magic sauce. Many times physicians are guilty of this. They have a phenomenal clinic. They're making 3 million in revenue, 5 million in revenue, 10 million in revenue. But if that physician leaves, the whole clinic falls apart, right? And the value is there for someone to pick it up. That's why when private equity buys a clinic like that, there's specific criteria. Or if there is some strategic person there, they have to stay there and keep doing what they're supposed to do and have an earnout, what do they call it? Because otherwise the business doesn't succeed. And so the key thing is you want to make it to where your presence there is optional and not necessary. So before we get into the episode, I want to ask you one critical question. If you stepped away from your business for 90 days, what would fall apart first? I want you to really think about that, because that is what's preventing you from your next level of growth. So section 1, I want to talk about what is a business operating system. A business operating system really is an invisible infrastructure that allows you and your company to run without chaos and eventually without you. It's what eventually becomes what we call a self-managing company. If you follow anything about Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coach, he refers to a company that can completely work without the founder, and the originator of the company is a self-managing company. The business operating system, what's the purpose? Well, it provides alignment. What that means is all the team members are on the same vision and mission. There's accountability. Everyone knows what they're responsible for. There's predictability, meaning, hey, I can hit this revenue month after month, quarter after quarter. There's scalability. Hey, I can, instead of just taking care of 10 patients or 50 patients or 100 patients, I can care of 1,000 patients, right? Or, hey, I produce X number of widgets, a month, or I serve this many customers, right? And the last two are leadership development, right? You continuously grow the leaders in the company and you hire underneath them, right? And that's really powerful. And then finally, you want to reduce the founder dependency. Everyone knows, right? McDonald's doesn't sell the best burger. What they sell is the scalability of selling 1 billion burgers a year, right? Or 1 billion burgers served. They sell consistency, right? Tesla doesn't scale just because of Elon, even though Elon's a critical importance for him. He's figured out how to make systems and structures and factories and teams and directors to where they can produce, 2, 3 million, 4 million cars a year while he's running around doing new companies, trying to go to the Mars and things like that. So let me ask you a question, and you should write this down. What decisions do you make repeatedly that should be systematized? And why am I asking that? I'm asking this question because if they have to come through you for the answer to a decision, you are essentially the bottleneck. And what you can do is, for example, like in a real estate property, if someone needs to spend more than $5,000 on an asset, they should present a memo and explain that to you. Or as you have bigger assets, maybe it's $50,000, right? Before they ask you. If it's in a business, like in a coaching company, you can say, hey, do whatever it takes to serve the coaching client under $1,000, right? That means they can buy them gifts, they can send them gift baskets, they can write thank you cards, they can send them books, anything under $1,000. And what happens is it triggers the creativity of the person and it unclogs the system. So now we're going to talk about the most common OSs or most common operating system frameworks. Many of you have heard of EOS, which stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. It was created by Gino Wickman, and many, many businesses, probably like several million businesses across the United States, use this. Usually it's best for 2 to 50-person teams, startups, and clinics. It's simple, it's powerful, and very structured. Why I like it is it clarifies the org chart, it solves people issues, and encourages you to have what we call a weekly level 10 meeting, which is a really powerful way to meet and conduct business and move the ball forward on the field. It invokes the strategy of rocks, which are 90-day goals, and it makes the company sprint in 90-day intervals, so quarters, like every quarter matters, right? And if you have 4 good quarters, you're going to have a phenomenal year. And then finally, there's something called a scorecard where you have some measurement, leading indicators, lagging indicators that help you advance the company forward. And sometimes you can't control the outcomes, but if you control the inputs, then the outputs eventually become what you want. Another operating system to consider is something called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. He has a book with the same name as well. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you on EOS, the book is called Traction, and there's a business parable that's called Get a Grip. So if you want to pick up those, that's fine. Scaling Up is by Vern Harnish, and he always talks about, how do we, scale a company? And a lot of times people use this for 50 to 500 person teams. It's best for people who want to have fast growth and operational complexity. And what they really focus on is cash strategy, hiring, culture, rhythms. They have dashboards and KPIs, and they help things that are difficult to scale. Another operating system that I've used personally is sort of a hybrid evolution from probably Scaling Up, Vern Harnish. It uses a lot of EOS languaging. And it's a good friend of mine, Steve Prada, and he started something called Pinnacle OS, which eventually became Summit OS. And he was our original EOS implementer, and we really enjoyed working with him. He has experience with KPMG and European investment banking, and worked with a lot of different companies in the East Coast and the Virginia area. And he really went into this thinking EOS was everything, but then he realized there was gaps in EOS, and he ended up filling those gaps with his own proprietary tools, which he modeled after some of the best business thinkers out there. So this Summit OS is really a flexible, strategic version for scaling founders. The strengths are really leadership development, strategic clarity, coaching, plus a system, plus cultural alignment, and it has something called playbooks, which are a different version of SOPs. So those are the ones that are out there. Honorable mentions are 40X and System and Soul. But there's others out there, but these are the ones that I've come across and that are some of the most experienced. So in this next section, we're going to really talk about what is the universal DNA that's shared by all these operating systems, right? They all are essentially the same concepts, just packaged differently. So if you understand the concepts, then you can use either any of them or just use these concepts to incorporate in your company. But this is what all successful companies share in common, right? The visionary, the founder has a vision. And how do you objectify the vision? You create a 10-year target. And this 10-year target is really something that is so grand, is so big that it should scare you. It should be like, how the hell am I going to accomplish that? And then what you do is you walk that back a little bit with a 3-year picture. What needs to happen, 3 years from now to hit that 10-year target? And the 3-year picture is always evolving. The 10-year target is a moonshot and you hope you hit it, but it's really a North Star. The 3-year picture is really like, hey, this is exactly what I want in 3 years to look like, and you're really going for this. And then finally, it comes down to your 1-year goals. And by having the 10, the 3, and the 1, everything is feeding into the next thing. And then you finally get into your 90-day rocks, which feed into your 1-year goals, which feed into your 3-year picture, which feed into your 10-year target, right? And also part of the vision is, what are the core values of the company? This is where culture lives. This is how culture is created. And the core values are very important because this is what defines who you want inside your company. So as you start hiring and firing, You also use this because this is your principles and ethics and values. And then the last one is a core focus, right? It's what are you good at, or what do you specialize in? And for example, in my company Viking Capital, we are specialized in buying, multifamily assets, institutional grade multifamily assets, right? That's our core focus. In Limitless, the entrepreneurial coaching company, we're really about helping ambitious entrepreneurial physicians achieve what we call escape velocity, which is, they're really thriving, they're enjoying their life, they're fulfilled, they're financially free, etc. So what happens really is a lot of people start companies, they start getting revenue, they even hire teams, but they don't have a clear vision. And if your vision is unclear, then the execution becomes impossible, right? But a goal well set is halfway accomplished. As I mentioned, the first part is vision. The next part is the people. A lot of times a company can thrive or dive if they don't have the right people in the right seats, right? Jim Collins talks about that in his book, Good to Great, right? So you need the right people in the right seats. You need not a org chart, which is just, hey, names and positions and where they sit, but accountability chart. Take out the names. What are the key positions needed for this company to be at this level? And then you see if those are the right people who belong in those chairs. And then obviously scorecards for each individual person. These are essentially report cards, for each business member. And then you want to delineate clear roles. And honestly, a lot of people think, I'm running a daycare, I have all these HR issues. It's not really HR issues, right? Most founders don't have people problems, they say, right? They have clarity problems. The people are either, there's not clear if they're the right person for the right role, or they're not clear. Sometimes we make the company mold around the individual versus the individual fitting into the right place in the company. And the only exception to this, I would say, is in the visionary role. So there's a great book called Rocket Fuel, which talks about most companies are started by two individuals. One person is the visionary, big picture, big ideas, big investors, big connections, big partners, and very creative, likes to do big things. And the other person is the integrator. This person helps the trains run on time. They create structure, function, operations, finance, playbooks, right? And they can see which ideas are real that they can execute on, which ideas are too much or overwhelming for the team, and they push back against the visionary. And they have to stand up to the visionary, which is important. In olden days, this would be called CEO and COO, but I don't think it really captures what these roles are. And that's why, a lot of times people are moving toward the visionary integrator analogy. So the next one is data, right? You need to start looking at the data. And when you have good data, you can make good decisions and you can make moves before things go for the worst, so you can help achieve your goals proactively. A lot of times, either people use bad data, bad scorecards, lagging indicators, and they're wondering why they're not hitting their outcomes. By you focusing on leading indicators, right? Control the controllables, focus on the inputs, and the outputs take care of themselves. And then the scorecard. The scorecard is essentially weekly KPIs that, if met consistently, advance the company forward, and it gives visibility and transparency to the founders and the leadership team of what's going on and what's possible. Then there's something called issues, right? These are issues, problems, challenges, obstacles, hurdles, whatever you want to call them. But when you have your weekly level 10 meetings, you want to save the majority of the time to solve the problems versus just reporting back on data, giving people updates. That should have been done either asynchronous or before the meeting, right? The main part of the meeting is to identify all the major issues that are facing the company, list them, prioritize them, and then solve them in the order of importance. And the way you solve them is you identify what the problem is, you diagnose the problem truly, what's the root cause of the problem, and then you end up solving the issue. And the way you solve it is you come up with concrete actions, and you capture those actions in what we call a to-do list or an action list. And if in the leadership circle, if there are other people on the team, for example, and I'll use a real estate example, if you're in acquisitions, then the rest of the acquisitions team needs to be notified of what the new change the leadership made. And that's called cascading messages. Really, the whole process is, this is how you think like a franchise, right? There's a book called The E-Myth and The E-Myth Revisited. And, they talk about really thinking of your business like a franchise. You're not going to document everything, but you want to document the critical 20% that drives the 80%. And, I've done this in my clinic in Vitology, where I had to make SOPs. Hey, this is how you check in a patient. Hey, this is how you onboard a new patient. This is how you discharge a patient. This is how, if there's billing questions, what needs to be done. I've done this in the real estate. Hey, this is how you get a new investor. This is how you evaluate new deals. This is how you run an investment committee. And then I've done this in the coaching companies where, hey, we have, we need to do a webinar. What is the protocol before we launch a webinar or some kind of marketing event to attract new clients? And then finally, it's really the traction, right? It's having, perhaps you can do this yourself, but eventually having a third party person holding you to your quarterly goals, holding you to your weekly cadence, and then eventually once a year you come together as your whole team, and instead of working in the business, you work on the business. And this is so powerful, and many people don't do this, right? And when you do this, you inevitably see a couple of things. You see profitability, you see growth of the company, you see projects being completed and then closed and then going after new projects. You see company morale increasing because there's a lot of clarity, there's a lot of cohesion, there's unity. Nothing festers for too long because in this system it gets flushed out, right? It eventually does become an issue and has to get resolved either in the weekly meetings or in the quarterly meetings or in the annual meeting. So if I had to ask you guys, is this how you run your companies? And if so, or if not, actually, which of these 6 would you say your company's weakest in? And if just for review, it's the vision, the people, the data, the issues, the process, or actually just getting the traction and the cadence. Now that you understand sort of the infrastructure, the question really is, when do you get to implement a business operating system? If you're new, if you're a startup, you just created your company, you're making less than $1 million of revenue, you should take these principles and concepts and start applying them. You should do your own do-it-yourself EOS, right? And you can go to eosworldwide.com. It's the entrepreneurial operating system website, and they have all these templates you can download for free. You can download the weekly meeting template, the scorecard template, the org chart template, and actually use it and get things going. This is for sub-$1 million companies. When you're making between 1 to 5 million, you really want to have a professional implementer, especially if there's more than one business partner involved. You're starting to see accountability issues or team issues. Feel like you're stuck, your growth is slow. You need more structure and clarity in your company. And then when you're at 5 to 20 million of revenue, I've seen EOS work in $100 million or $300 million a year revenue companies. So this is not just for small companies. Even big companies do it. Obviously, they're running at a much higher clip than smaller companies. And really, you must have like full professional system. You have to have hiring figured out. You have to have cash flow cycles, revenue management, marketing channels. You have to have a really robust leadership team. There may be a couple of layers of your leadership team. You're really focusing on EBITDA, right? Which is a way to discuss profit. And if you can do this consistently, your EBITDA will jump. Honestly, tough conversations usually happen during these meetings, and that's needed because that's where you solve real business issues. So let me ask you guys a question. What was the real reason you haven't implemented something like this, right? Is it fear? Is it time? Is it loss of control? Is it lack of knowledge? What is it that hasn't allowed you to get the structure you need in your business, your clinic, your real estate, your side hustle? I'm curious, just put in the comment or DM me, on Instagram. Love to hear, and I can create more content on that. Now we're talking about how to really self-implement, right? We've talked about why you should implement, but let's say you're not ready to hire somebody and you want to do this on your own. What does it look like? Well, I want you to gather your team. Probably 90 minutes is adequate, and you need to start thinking about how to build the vision, right? So you can ask questions like, hey, what are we building? Who are we building for? Who's our ideal client? Who's our ideal avatar, right? Why? What's the ultimate purpose? How long will this take? And what does victory look like, right? And the org chart, you really want to start, and it's not an org chart really, it's an accountability chart. You want to say, hey, what are the roles and responsibilities that are needed? Let's assume we fired everyone in the company and we're just building out a chart with no one's names, but just the positions and the responsibilities. What is needed, right? How many people is needed, either in the current state or in a future state that we're trying to achieve? And then you go through and see which people would fit those roles, and you go through a series of questions to answer. Next, you really want to have a cadence of meeting weekly. This is a non-negotiable. If you just did one thing, guys, it's meeting every week with your team, same time, same place, same bat channel. Some of you guys will get that reference, right? It's scorecard. And what do you discuss? What is the structure of those level 10 meetings? It would be, at the beginning, you connect, you have a little, segue into the meeting, one business win, one personal win, right? Then you get into your scorecard, and it's usually like yes or no, on track, off track. Then you get into your rocks. Hey, are you on track for your 90-day goals? And you go through company rocks and individual rocks. Then you get into any employee headlines. Hey, Sue's going to be out. She's going to be on vacation for the next 2 weeks. Hey, Rob is having jury duty. Hey, customer really, really loved our product and submitted a testimonial. Fantastic. Then you go through and, you talk about issues. You rank all the issues. And by the way, you've been accumulating issues all week, accumulating issues even in prior part of the meeting. This is the where you actually discuss. The rest of the stuff is really supposed to be quick check-ins, boom, 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 5 minutes for each topic. When you get into this part, the issues, you really want to go all in, right? The whole meeting can be either 60 minutes up to 90 minutes. But the goal is really you spend the majority of that time on solving issues. And when you solve the issues, again, identify the problem, diagnose it, solve it. And the goal is to solve it to where it's a solution. Now, the solutions are usually 1 week items, action items that you create, to-dos, if you will. And then they go live in the to-do list. And then finally, you cascade the messages, you sign out, check out, rate the meeting, and you're done. Examples of like scorecards could be, for medical clinics, what are the new leads, what's the show rate, conversion of like a new consult to an actual surgery. It could be how many procedures or visits per day. It could be collections. It could be how many patients each practitioner is seeing. It could be room utilization, payroll, patient satisfaction. There's a lot of things you can do there. And then, again, you're not going to document everything, but figure out the most critical tasks in your company that have to be done the right way, the same way every time, and figure out how to document them. Now with AI, this is so easy, right? You literally figure out the process, figure out the thing, dictate into AI the process of how it's done right. AI is going to spit back you an SOP, give that SOP to someone on your team and ask them to run that SOP or run that playbook. Now, if they're able to achieve the same outcome you did, then it's perfect. Then it's ready to rock and roll and be implemented. But if not, you need to redo your dictation and adjust the SOP until it's correct, and then ask someone to demonstrate again. So it's really, if you want to delegate, most people really don't delegate, they abdicate. So what I recommend is I would demonstrate, document, then delegate, right? So you demonstrate the task, you actually physically do the task, then you and that person really document all that, and again, use AI, and then delegate it, meaning, hey, it's now yours, go do it. And if they can do it this within a certain amount of closeness to your accuracy, then you can officially say, hey, it's on your plate now. But if they can't, you have to keep repeating the process until they can. Okay? And the quote here is really document once, execute forever. And another quote really is do what you do best and delegate the rest. The key thing here is the faster you guys can get into your zone of genius, the better it is for everybody. So let's talk about clinics and medical practices, right? And how they could really benefit from the most. I've been to so many practices as a patient, as my doctor, as a referral, as even in my own cardiology practice when I was working. And there's a lot of unique challenges in medical practices. The EMR is chaotic. There's provider bottlenecks. There's no-shows, right? There's billing breakdowns. There's compliance, staff turnover, complexity with multiple locations, new regulations with Medicare, Medicaid, right? So how does an operating system solve this? It provides standardization. Your team loves standardization. They crave it, in fact. You want to have clear, provider scorecards for your NPs, your PAs, your MAs, your physicians. You need to train them on the SOPs to make sure it's a repeatable success. You want to have perfect way for the patients to come in, the patient workflow, right? How do they come in from referrals, from insurance selections to, cash-based pay? Like, how are they coming in? How do you address them? How do they convert into paying patients? And then how do they get good customer service? And then, how do they stay in your system? How do you increase the lifetime value? That's important. And the other thing is really, helping you increase profitability. A lot of physicians run great high revenue practices, but I'm curious, I'm wondering how many run high EBITDA practices, how highly profitable practices. If you listen to any of my stuff in the past, I've always talked about trying to get an overhead at least of 70% or less, right? You want to have at least a 30% profit margin. Some places it's less, some places more, but you want to figure out where you start with and start improving that. And then really developing leadership layers beneath the physician, so the physician doesn't have to do everything. This is what creates the freedom that a lot of doctors are craving. And here's some quotes to live by, right? A clinic without an operating system becomes a prison for the doctor. A clinic with an operating system becomes a scalable asset. What would happen if you operate your clinic at 80% consistency instead of 30%? What would happen if your clinic could work without you? What would happen if you became more of a CEO instead of a practitioner, in your clinic? So those are the kind of questions you want to maybe start asking yourself. A lot of times there's business partners, there's associates, there's people in your company, and there's sometimes pain points because of that. And so here's how a business operating system can sometimes help solve these partner pain points. One, there's a lot of times there's unclear roles, there's differing visions, there's decision bottlenecks, there's emotional disagreements, there's lack of data, right? When you have an operating system, right, you have clear accountability. You've all agreed upon what the goals are for the company. You make data-based decisions. It's neutral, right? You take emotions out of it. And by you addressing the issues and you do it scientifically, it gets rid of the resentment and like the too much of the personalities there. And everyone knows what they're responsible for. So it's all in the org chart, the accountability chart, right? The system becomes a referee, not the founder, and definitely not the loudest partner. So I'm just going to run through how I've really used this in my own life. When, in Limitless MD and Viking Capital, we worked initially with Steve Prada. We did an EOS strategy, and then we quickly moved on to his Summit OS. And then now we've eventually went back to another EOS implementer who really deals with companies at a higher caliber, with 10, 15, $20 million of revenue kind of thing. And so it's been great to get his perspective as well. So the key is to keep looking until you find the right EOS implementer and or business operating system implementer. And once you have good connection and clarity, you want to run that system for at least a couple of years. You'll notice that one meeting is great, but consistently doing this for 4 quarters, 8 quarters, 12 quarters, you're going to have compounded growth. Really, and because of this, in our own company, we have, as the team has grown, we have clarity, we have awesome rocks, and we know how to goal set properly. My partner and I, depending on which company, we have good communication. I have strong quarterly alignment. I have higher accountability. I really understand my profit and loss. I'm usually not a numbers guy as much because I'm more of the visionary. But if you don't know your numbers, you don't have your vital signs on your business. And this allows me to have the vital signs. And, I've had a lot of folks use this in their medical clinics, right? In fact, one of my clients is really crushing it in his plastic surgery clinic using this. And he's reduced his work hours. He has more accountability now. He has scorecards. He knows who the right people to hire and when. He knows what the main goals are for 2025, 2026, 2027. There's a process where his clinic is going to be very valuable because it can be packaged as a true scalable, systematic asset. And so that's really the success there. And then in real estate, I know numerous companies that use this to, have the right team, go after the right deals, raise the right amount of capital, asset management. All of that is incorporated here. So what I'm really coming at is how do we have this franchise mindset, right? The key is your business should be so predictable you can franchise it. And really, as this having this franchise or founder mindset, you want to get rid of this founder dependency that the company has on you. You want to document your customer journey. You want to document the sales process. You want to document your delivery. You want to create multiple layers of leadership eventually. And eventually, you want to build a sellable asset. Whether you choose to sell or not, that's up to you. But if it's sellable, then it's valuable. Even if you never sell your company, build it as if you must. And then what I would ask is, if your business, if you're ready to walk away from everything, what would your business be worth? Is it worth anything? Can it be sellable? Is it a real asset, right? And how much dependency does it have on you as a founder? So with that said, guys, I hope that was helpful, right? And, the key really is you don't need more discipline. You need fewer decisions, right? Remember, we all have decision fatigue. So if this episode was helpful to you, please subscribe and follow us on YouTube and the podcast. I look forward to hearing your comments and seeing what really clicked for you guys. And until next time, be phenomenal.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Limitless MD. If you found value from this episode, I encourage you to share this episode with a friend and let me know by leaving a review. For more information, make sure you check out the links in the show notes below or simply visit vikramraya.com. Until next time, be phenomenal.